Hi everyone, this is Mrs. Parr, and on this episode of Math Up to Par, we are going to be talking about equivalent fractions and decimals. We're going to be talking about tenths, halves, fourths, and fifths. So when we're talking about tenths, you say the fraction and the decimal the exact same way. So 1/10 is read as a fraction here. It's also read as a decimal here as 1/10. So you say 1/10, 1/10, 2/10, 2/10, 3/10, 3/10. You get the picture. These bars down here show 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10, and so on. These can be represented using both fractions and decimals. Fractions and decimals both show parts that are smaller than 1, so they can be used interchangeably to represent a value that's smaller than 1. So to remember how to kind of solve this is you would look at, say, 7/10 right here, okay? And that is equal to 7/10 right here. So this 7 in the numerator just gets written in the tenths place, okay? Because this is out of 10, okay? It's 1/10 smaller than the ones place. So 7/10, so really the trick to remember the tenths is just to put the numerator in the tenths place of your decimal. So the tenths are something that you can memorize the fraction and decimal equivalents to. Now, when it comes to 1/2, the decimal for 1/2 is equal to 0.5. The reason for that is because the 5 is in the tenths place, and we learned that 0.5 is equal to 5/10. Well, 5/10, 5 is half of 10, so that means 5/10 is equal to 1/2. So we have the tenths place, so half of the tenths place is 5. So that's why the 5 is there. So this picture right here, that would represent 1/2 or 5/10. Okay, so 5/10 represents 1/2. The trick to help you remember, if you take AR tests and you read a shorter book, you might see a 0.5 written in there or like a 3.5. So I always tell my students to think of AR points when you're thinking of half. So like, oh, this short book is only worth half a point. AR has it as 0.5. So that's just kind of a silly way to think about it. But the reason is because 5 is half of 10 and the 10th place is that place right there. So that's why 0.5 is equal to 1/2. This fraction to decimal equivalence is really important for you to just learn and memorize. You should just know that 1/2 is equal to 0.5 and 0.5 is equal to 1/2. And 0.5 is said as 5/10 because it's in the tenths place. All right, fourths. I love fourths. So when I think about fourths, I think about money. I think about quarters. All right, there are 4 quarters in a dollar, okay? So there are 4 pieces that make up one whole when it's out of fourths, right? So we have 25 cents, 50 cents, and 75 cents. So 25 cents is 1 quarter. So 1 out of 4, 1/4 is 25 cents, or 0.25 or 0.25, otherwise known as 25 hundredths, because that is up to the hundredths place. I'm going to skip over to my 3/4. 3/4 is equal to 0.75, which is read as 75 hundredths because it is 75 cents, because 3/4 is equal to 75 cents. 3 out of 4 is equal to 75 hundredths. Now, when I have this pattern, you would think, okay, I've got 25 hundredths, 50 hundredths, and 75 hundredths. Well, we took off that 0 at the end of the 5 when we're talking about 2/4 because we are putting this in simplest form. And when we put a decimal in simplest form, we take any zeros off of the end. So this is the same thing as 50 cents, but to put it in simplest form, we just take that 0 off. So it's the same thing as 5/10. 50 hundredths is equal to 5/10. Now, So you'll notice that right here we have 2/4 is equal to 0.5, 1/2 is equal to 0.5, and 5/10 is equal to 0.5. So the reason for that is because 0.5 is equal to 1/2, right? Well, 1/2 is also equal to 2/4, and 2/4 is equal to 5/10, which is how I would read that. It's also equal to 3/6. It's equal to 4/8. So anything where the numerator is exactly half of the denominator is equal to 1/2, and 1/2 is equal to 5/10, because 5 is half of the tenths place. So this 0.5, this 5/10 decimal, represents several different fractions. So a decimal can represent fractions that are equivalent to one another. All right, let's talk about fifths. So far we've talked about tenths, and we've said, okay, tenths are easy to memorize because I just take the numerator and I put it in the tenths place of my decimal. Halves, I just need to know that 5 is half of my tenths place, so 0.5, 5/10 is equal to 1/2. I just need to memorize that. I need to practice that and remind myself and learn that. And then when I think of fourths, I think, oh yeah, there's 4 quarters in a dollar, so I'm gonna remember quarters. So now, when I'm looking at fifths, fifths can be the trickiest to memorize sometimes, but it's still very possible. So when we're memorizing fifths, we need to change those fifths into tenths. Once we change them into tenths, then we can put those in decimal form. So for example, if I have 2/5 and I multiply my numerator and my denominator by 2, because 2 over 2, I'm multiplying it by 1 whole to equal an equivalent fraction. So now I have tenths, and 2 times 2 is 4. So that means that 4/10 is equal to 0.4 4/10. So that's why 4/10 is equal to 2/5. So you have 2/5 right here is equal to 4/10 as a decimal, 0.4. Same thing if you did 3/5, so you'd have 3/5, and I'm going to multiply it by 2/2, right? And so I'm going to end up getting 4/10. No, not 4/10, 6/10, because 3 times 2 is 6. And I'm trying to make my denominator tenths, because once I make it tenths, I then know, oh yeah, 6/10, I say it as a fraction and a decimal the same way, it would be equal to 6/10, which would match up right here. You'll notice that because fifths are odd, and I look at my circles right here, I can't split my fifths exactly in half without creating smaller pieces. So I don't have a 0.5 as equivalent to one of my fifths because I can't split 5 evenly in half without making even smaller pieces. So that's true of your odd numbers. Really, your fifths, the way you look at it is you're going to multiply your numerator by 2. When you multiply your numerator by 2, you're creating tenths, and that's going to tell you how many tenths you have. So 1 times 2 is 2, so that's equal to 2 tenths. 2 times 2 is 4, that's equal to 4 tenths. 3 times 2 is 6, that's equal to 6 tenths. And 4 times 2 is 8, so that's equal to 8 tenths. Okay? So our tenths, our halves, our fourths, and our fifths, all of these have strategies that you can use to figure them out. And if you memorize the rules to them, that can help you compare values and to understand the relationship between fractions and decimals a little bit better. So I recommend taking a little bit of time to memorize these, because there are other fraction to decimal equivalents that are not as easy to memorize, but these ones, with a little bit of practice, you can commit these to your memory, and it'll help you when you are relating fractions and decimals together. All right, guys, thanks for listening and happy practicing.